Rayman 3 is a game that I have fond memories of. I like to run through its worlds, listen to its soundtrack, and stare at the beautifully designed areas in the game. It does a lot of things right, from the variety in its environments, to the way each stage has its own musical flavor. I know it's not everyone's favorite, but for some it is, and that includes me. The Bog of Murk marks one of the bigger tone shifts in the game. You've just left behind the bright greens of Clearly Forest, and an upbeat lighthearted funky board stage, when you find yourself dropped in a rainy, eerie swamp. It is one of the most atmospheric chapters in Rayman 3, and today, I want to explore what makes it so memorable. The area stays pretty true to its name. It is a large swamp in a darker, foggy area of the world in Rayman 3. You can see a few large flying creatures in the sky, as well as birds circling the area. The GameCube version even has these raindrops on your screen in this particular part, which I find to be a nice touch. When first entering the area, it puts Rayman in a bit of an awkward situation, where he falls down into an outhouse, already occupied by Begoniacs, the resident witch of the swamp. After she scolds Rayman for being a disgusting creature, she dashes off back to her hut, which you can see in the distance. Outside her hut, you'll come across a frog that hops away if you approach it, a small but lively detail that adds to the swamp's wildlife, while also piquing the interest of players to follow it, encouraging more exploration before progressing. When you eventually enter the witch's hut, it kicks off a boss fight around a large bubbly cauldron. This brew can transform anyone who touches it into a toad. So that frog we saw earlier might just have been a previous victim. If Rayman gets splashed by the mixture, he will turn into a toad himself. Lucky for him, it works both ways, also affecting Begoniacs, making her more vulnerable to your attacks. Eventually the witch scurries off, and naturally the player would follow her downstairs, where she is now standing on an elevated platform, the cauldron she wears as a hat now completely covering her face, as she tosses some vague, flirty remarks at Rayman. Despite the area not containing much to do, I do like the music that plays here. All the while in the distance you can hear Glowbox call out for you. Seemingly coming from the mysterious mirror in front of the witch, which is your next path forward, transporting Rayman deeper into the swamp. This next section after the witch hut also brings in a few new enemy types, like hoodboomers on stilts and the spinneroo, this chunky hoodlum that spins like an idiot when you get close, showing off more of that hoodlum enemy variety. It also feels like this swamp is connected to some of the swamp-like areas in Rayman 2, as some of it felt familiar to what was previously seen in that game. This becomes all the more apparent because they make a few references to things seen in Rayman 2, like with these vines and the fact that the water is infested with piranhas. Originally, more stuff from Rayman 2 would have been carried over to this area of the game, which was sadly cut out in the end. They did a really good job with the Bog of Murk's color palette, and it's complemented even more so by the very fitting atmospheric music. Seriously, I found myself just observing the area's beautifully designed levels after clearing them of enemies, trying to see if I could spot anything interesting in the distance. The combination of the dreamlike locations with the music really does give the Bog of Murk its own unique vibe. It does an incredible job at making the areas feel alive in a way only Rayman's unique art direction could pull off. Like this dreamlike musical theme that plays in this open swamp area, and if you scan the horizon you can see a bunch of Hoodlum zeppelins flying about, a subtle hint that they're mobilizing their forces across the swamp. This particular chapter also has a linear layout and contains a lot smaller platforming sections, the main hazard being piranha-filled water. That also prevents you from traveling out too far of the playable area, but allows the world to look a lot larger than what it technically is. The hoodlums who are still at large show up here and there too, and try to prevent you from progressing through the swamp. There are other hostile creatures that can be found in the swamp too, such as these things called muddy bogs. They are hostile to both Rayman and the hoodlums, implying that you're treading on their territory. As Rayman ventures deeper into the tunnels, he will eventually reach a large ominous mansion, which is under siege by the hoodlums, and the way the music slowly switches from the swamp theme to the mansion theme is done incredibly well. The more organic water swamp-like musical sounds gradually shift into a more granular orchestral piece, and it's done so smooth it gives me goosebumps every time I hear it. It is taking on a more foreboding tone. And then a brief hit with what sounds like a euphonium, as if it's actively presenting the mansion to the player. It nails that sense of mystery so incredibly well, I cannot overstate how much I love this. After defeating the hoodlums and stepping inside the mansion, the music kicks it up one last time, opening with a sharp brass fanfare that sounds exactly like a hunting call. It fits perfectly, because that's exactly who you're about to face, Count Razov, a maniacal hunter who wields a shotgun and seemed to have his crosshair on Rayman.
Unlucky and unwise is he who risks entering my domain. Let's give him a warm welcome.
The mansion is also a little maze-like, and yet another tone shift from the darker swamp. There's a lot of crazy decor featured here, and the walls are filled with portraits of the guy, not to mention the abundance of statues. Additionally, the silly neo-baroque orchestral music that plays while Razov makes his snarky comments makes all of this emphasize the feeling of, so this guy thinks he's hot shit. But in reality, he's just a goofy, clumsy marksman living alone in a mansion in the middle of a swamp. He's chained up a bunch of the local creatures named Uglies, which he can free by shooting their chains. The fight between Rayman and Razov is akin to a cat-and-mouse game, and he apparently refers to Rayman by his name, seemingly already having had his eyes on Rayman for quite some time. This would make sense given his little setup with a chair and a telescope. If we go by the lore outside of the game itself, Razov comes from a lineage of hunters, where each one traditionally would capture and bring home exotic prey. So my guess is that he considers Rayman to be that exotic prey, especially considering the comments he makes. Rayman ain't gonna let that fly though, and after defeating Razov, the guy runs off into the cellar, where a final showdown between him and Rayman takes place. Before you go there though, you can explore the mansion a little and listen to the ambient sounds, like here in this clockwork hall, while you observe the statues and other contraptions. Look, it's Sam from Rayman 2. When you eventually do enter the cellar, you can face off against him one last time, while he tries to squish you with a large wrecking ball. And you can hear Glowbox call out for you when you fall down there, then scolding one of those creatures we saw flying around earlier when it puts you back up there. And sometimes it provides you with a power-up. When you've knocked Razov off his wrecking ball one last time, a cutscene begins. Razov now has his crosshair on Glowbox, only to be startled by a group of Uglies that suddenly appear. Terrified, he bolts straight into the arms of Begoniax, who also seems to be there, who is more than happy to see him. Glowbox asks Rayman how they can continue on their original journey. When Rayman mentions that he thinks he has an idea, the camera pans to another magic mirror, and this is where the chapter ends. The Bog of Murk is not a difficult chapter to play through. The stage design is pretty linear, and there's barely any backtracking. Some may say the swamp area could feel a little boring, and the areas might come across as a little filler-y, but it's not overbearing, and the Bog of Murk is a relatively short area in the game. The Throttlecopter power-up also gets introduced in this chapter, but it is kind of underutilized. I think they could have made some cool helicopter sections in the swamp, giving you more of a bird's eye view of the layout below, kinda like they did at the start of the chapter. I do think it does so much right on the design and atmosphere department, that whatever criticisms there are, should not be a reason to completely dismiss this chapter. I do, however, wish that they kept some of the original ideas planned for this area, as that would have made it fleshed out a lot more, fitting the overall story. Originally, the Bog of Murk was going to open with Rayman and Glowbox flying on a creature called the Woogla. During the flight, it somehow got injured, and after crash landing, Rayman would seek help from Begoniax, leading him on a quest for a beauty potion that eventually reveals Razov's tears as the true elixir. This cut storyline would have ended with a bizarre romance between Razov and Begoniax, and their promise to help Rayman reach the land of the living dead. This of course is completely contrary to what actually happens in the final version, where Razov absolutely doesn't want to be anywhere near Begoniax. Though I kinda wish we could have seen more of what the original storyline would have looked like. In the original story, on his quest to obtain the potion, Rayman would also come across an old friend, Sam, who would perhaps help him cross the marsh like he did in Rayman 2. And even though Sam did not appear in Rayman 3 as a supporting character, his textures can still be found in the game files, and there's a statue of him in Razov's mansion. Let's assume it's a statue and not taxidermy though, otherwise that would be a bit morbid. In a screenshot of an earlier build of the swamp, it looks like they were going for more of a platforming structure, akin to what we saw in Rayman 2. With this, it would take place during the day, featuring a more grey-brownish color palette. Something left over from it being daytime is also the fact that in Razov's mansion, through the windows, you can see bright daylight, even though it was clearly night when you entered the manor. I assume this was an oversight maybe. Glowbox would originally have been captured by Razov, giving Rayman a more clear reason to locate his mansion. And given the fact that Glowbox swallowed Andre earlier in the game, this would also explain why the Hoodlums were trying to get inside. Because they changed the story in the final game, this does leave a few things unexplained. As in the final version, it was never explained how Glowbox got in Razov's cellar, and the only reason we know how Begoniax got there is due to her jumping through the mirror in an unused cutscene. Out of all chapters in Rayman 3, people usually mention the land of the living dead or the desert of the Knaaren when talking about this game. But I think this chapter deserves more love than it usually gets. While it's a shame that this chapter didn't get all the ideas originally planned for it, it is still a great example of the beautiful artistic legacy of the 3D Rayman games. Do let me know what you all thought of this area. Be sure to share your thoughts and memories down in the comments, and if you want to see more of these level spotlight videos, make sure you subscribe. My name is Enter, thank you for watching.
See you in Rayman 4!